Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Look, it's another fabulous day, and we're delighted this evening that we have got the CEO of a company called EQT. We're going to hear all about them. Christian Sinding, thank you so much for joining us. Absolutely brilliant to have you this evening. We're going to be exploring a little bit about your journey, hearing about the firm that you've created. It's a fabulous, fabulous firm, and we'd love to know a little bit about how you've made it all happen. I know it's not just you, it's about a team. You're part of a bigger picture. But we'd love to hear about how you've done that. And ladies and gentlemen, throw your questions into the Q&A, because this is your chance to ask someone who's an entrepreneur, someone who understands what it is to build a great culture and a great team and a great bunch of people. That doesn't happen by accident. So you're going to be able to ask all your questions, and hopefully we'll get around to answering at least some of them. But before we do that, well, let me first of all say welcome, Christian. Thank you very much. I know you're busy, and congratulations. I know you just literally, you're in the middle of buying Sober Health, and I know that that's gone through. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Like I said, you've got no time. You're probably in the middle of doing your deal, and you've had to step out. We'll let you go in like 45 minutes or so. But I thought before I did that, I'm just going to ask Stu to show a video. I came across this video. It's about your firm. Guys, it might be a little bit jerky because you know how it is when you're sharing a video, it's like it's got a buffer and so on, but it's worth watching, because this is a firm where people, you can just see from the people that they love being there. And I just wanted to show this. So Stu, let's do it.
I joined EQT 12, 13 years ago, and the reason was really that I felt it was a truly entrepreneurial and performance-driven organization.
And I saw a lot of opportunity.
The reason I joined EQT was really because of the people.
That's what sets EQT apart from competitors.
Because in the end, that's what it's all about, right? We don't have any, fixed assets. It's all about the people in the end.
We're different, and we do things differently. That's what I love about EQT.
How I interpreted EQT's culture, I think we are all very respectful of everyone around us, everyone we are working with.
Everywhere you go, every interaction you have, there's an incredible amount of will and energy of doing something that they love.
So I think it's one of those places where people actually come to work, not because they have to, but because they want to.
In a sense, EQT is like a family, in that you can really be yourself.
The organization in itself is very curious. We want to do things differently.
What's unique about EQT is it's informal and yet very high-performing culture. It's our ability to combine a high-performance culture with true respect for our colleagues and other stakeholders.
I would say that EQT is unique. That's probably the one word that I would use.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Awesome. EQT is awesome.
Quality. I think it's a high-quality team comprised of high-quality individuals doing business in a high-quality way.
Unstoppable. Together as a team, we're unstoppable.
I just love that. Congratulations, man. I mean, that is just a fabulous group of people that you have. You can see they love coming to work.
Yeah.
I love the comment that we come to work because we want to, not because we have to. And they keep saying we love the place. Yeah, I mean, that's, you can't, it just speaks for itself, right?
And it's all about the people. That's really, a couple of people say that, and it really is true. It's a fascinating industry that way. Capital is a commodity. So where's our differentiation? It's people.
Absolutely, I get that. I want to just tell people who you are, first of all. So we'll get into this. I can't wait to, but let me just, let's very quickly just, so your CEO, your managing partner, you've been at the firm since 1998. You serve on several of the firm's investment committees. You're chairman of the Global Investment Forum. You're a board member of the EQT Foundation, and you're on the board of a leading Scandinavian family office. So, I mean, you have your finger in a ton of pies, Christian, right? I mean, you must be a super busy guy. You got a BSc with distinction in 1994 from the University of Virginia. And by the way, you support the Base Camp Foundation in the Masai Mara region of Africa, and it's all about sustainable development, and you're all into that as well. So I know you're busy. As I said, I just saw on the wires that you just closed out your Cerba Healthcare deal. So congratulations on that. Yeah, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Look, I'd love to get in a little bit into the firm. Let's hear a bit about that. You know, what does these guys describe your firm as? You obviously said, give me one word, or maybe it wasn't even you. Someone else was interviewing them. One word to describe the firm, and they said, awesome, awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
How do you build a firm like? Doesn't happen by accident. Everyone knows you don't build awesome firms by accident. Tell us a little bit about your values, your mantra, how you put a firm together of great people.
Yeah. Great question. And you know, when we were founded back in 1994, we actually were founded out of a family holding company, a family that's been investing in companies since 1856, the Wallenberg family. So we grew up with really good family values, but we wanted to take those values that are investing for hundreds of years and apply it to private equity, and invest in, you know, we're investing in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 year timeframes. So we wanted to take their long-term thinking and their, you know, deep-rooted values in society and really apply that to private equity. And in order to do that, you have to accelerate things. So we have this unique kind of respectful, down-to-earth culture on the one hand. On the other hand, we're very entrepreneurial, very fast-moving. We have to take decisions very quickly, and therefore we needed a separate culture than the one we came from the family. In the beginning, we said, you know, EQT more than capital. That was our moniker. And then about 10, 12, 13 years later, we said, okay, what does it really mean? You know, what are the values? What makes us unique? And we went through a process and we actually designed those values, or defined them, both actually. And then we ended up with 5 of them. And some of them are actually quite unique for the finance industry. Entrepreneurial is one of them. Informal is a second one. Transparent is a third one. And I dare to say that there are very few firms that have those values in the finance industry, and definitely very few firms really live them. Now, on top of that, we have high performing and respectful. And respectful, I think, is I think you hear that a lot in the finance world. Not sure it's always lived either. High performing, I think everybody has. And we felt like we also needed to have that, because at the end of the day, you know, we do want to make sure that we're delivering, you know, great returns in a responsible way to our clients. But then after we define these values, what do we then do? Well, then you actually have to really live them. So we use the values in hiring. We use the values in developing and promoting. And we also use them in firing, if we can use that sharp word. So we typically like to say that, you know, you're allowed to make mistakes at EQT. You're even encouraged to make mistakes, because in private equity, you have to, you know, without any risk, there's no reward. So you have to make mistakes in order to learn, as long as you continue to learn from them. So you're allowed to make mistakes, but you're not allowed to work against the culture. So you can lose your job faster, or you would and will, if you work against the culture than you do if you make mistakes. Of course, if you make continuous mistakes, you should probably find another career. But that's really what we mean by high performing. We want people to learn, to develop, to take risk, and to get better and better and better, but do that in the context of our values. And that also means that we can, the final point, I think, before I open it back to questions, is it also means that we can grow pretty quickly, because we're not growing like a formalized firm with a lot of checklists. And I like to say we're not the KPMG of private equity. We grow with our culture. So when we find great people that we can bring in and they work with our culture, they understand when, okay, and now I have a problem. How do I solve that? Okay, I'm going to call this person or call that person, or think about what my mentor, think about what the values say. So it's really ingrained in everything we do, and as you can also hear from the video.
Yeah. I love that. And the nice thing about values, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, when you hear a firm talking about its values, and every firm talks about its values, the big question is, do they live the values? And what I liked was that your guys just kept coming up with, when you were asking them questions, they would say, when they were being asked questions, they would say we're respectful. They would say we're informal. They would say we're high performing. So clearly the values are embedded. And the nice thing about values, I always think, is that it's kind of a code for how we do things in our firm.
Yeah.
So when someone steps out of line or doesn't live the values, it's very easy to say, well, when you joined the firm, you knew that this was what our values were, because we told you on day one. So we're always respectful. And what you did just now wasn't respectful. So you're going to have to either adjust and be more respectful, or you're going to have to find somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah, love that, love that, love that. So when you're looking for people who are really exceptional, because again, high performance people have to be, you have to find them and then you have to train them. How do you know what you're looking for? What does the raw talent look like when they walk in? Can you tell immediately? Do you run a battery of tests? I mean, how can you tell?
That's a really good question. In the if I can say the good old days, it was really about using our network to find talented people, using headhunters, using universities and other networks like this network, for example, which wasn't available at the time. And then we actually just interviewed the person with our own personal and professional questions. We weren't that prescriptive, and I think that was actually quite a good way to build the culture, because then it became culture and diversity of thinking, background, approach, bringing something to the table. We like to say that whenever we hire someone, we want them to raise the bar of the average of EQT with something, whether that's a different way of thinking or a different background or different experience or whatever it might be. Then for a while, we became very prescriptive, and we had case studies and sat for hours and analyzed things and presented them, whatever. But that only actually fit a certain kind of person. So then we lost some diversity actually in thinking, and now we're doing a hybrid, I guess you could say, that we're back to this to trying to find a broader set of people who can join us and help us develop. But of course, we still do some, let's say, some case study type questions. We even use an online psychological test or analysis or whatever you want to call it, which is nothing complicated, but it just kind of categorizes you as a person. And we've done it all to ourselves as well. So you kind of know, okay, these are the types of personalities that are at EQT. And again, you want it to be diverse. So you want it's different colors, whatever. You want the yellow and red to work with the blue and green and all that kind of stuff. So, but are we perfect? No, but are we continuously figuring it out, what works and what doesn't work? Yeah.
And what about you? Let's talk a little bit about you, Christian, your journey. So you do a degree, get a distinction. It's way back 1994.
Yeah.
And now here you are, CEO and managing partner. All these years later. Maybe in just a couple of minutes, maybe just give us a bit of a sense of your own journey, the highs, the lows, things that worked out, didn't work out. How have you ended up here from where you started?
Yeah. Good, great question. And I think from a personality point of view, I've always been curious and trying to figure out what's around the next corner. And sometimes at EQT we characterize that kind of person as a why not person. Yep. Instead of yes but. There's a why not, or sure, why not? And I have that. I have that kind of personality, and I think a lot of, most people at EQT probably do. Do you want to take that challenging new position, or do you want to move to a new country, or do you want to try this or try that or whatever? And you say, yeah, sure, why not?
Why not? Love it.
And then you learn. So it wasn't a grand plan, I must say, but actually when I was studying in college in the US, and I'm Norwegian by background, but I partly grew up in the US. So I was studying, and I thought I was going to go into advertising like my dad. I thought it sounded cool. And met some cool, fun, creative people there. But then I learned more about the financial world, and I had a great teacher, some fun, colleagues at university, and found that actually I found private equity or buyouts to be pretty interesting already back then. So I joined an advisory firm, and that was really interesting. They were a small firm, 50, 60 people at the time. And what I found great about them is they work with so many different kinds of clients. But we did lots of investments, where we advised on many investments and on divestments. But I was always curious, what happened to the companies after you make the advice to sell or to buy? Sure. Something happens. So I was always curious about that part. So then I applied to a number of different places, and I got a job with what was then AEA Investors, who was working in private equity, my industry. And the day I interviewed there, they said, "Oh, this is really cool. We just sponsored a new firm in Stockholm called EQT. How fun! Maybe you can work on that project if you get the job." And I got the job on the day, and then I was like, "Wow, this is amazingly exciting." I didn't dare say yes right away, so I said yes the next morning because I thought that was such a cool fit. And I worked in New York for a while, and what I learned then was something that is a piece of advice, and that is AEA was a very successful firm, but it didn't have a good culture. It was very hierarchical, very closed, non-transparent. We didn't know how decisions were taken by the senior people. We didn't get a lot of information. It was a lot about analysis. I would even say analysis paralysis, so over-analysis before taking decisions. And then I got to know EQT, and I found it the opposite. Much more entrepreneurial, open, willing to take risks, and then rather analyzing afterwards, should we take this risk or not? So with like this positive kind of why not attitude. And luckily I got an internship with EQT from AEA. So I moved to Stockholm in Sweden and in 1998 in an internship. And then 3 years later, I think I had my employment agreement. We were a very fast growing firm at the time. I was employee number 11, now we're 1,000. So it's been, a huge amount of growth. And along the way there, I've worked in 5 different countries, married my American wife, had kids, and now I'm living in Switzerland, where we have our kind of 2 headquarters. We have Stockholm and a small one here in Zurich. And I'm still, and I think the reason that I'm here is that I still have that curiosity, that drive to sort of figure out what's around the next corner.
So look, that's fabulous. Thank you so much for just taking a couple of minutes to do that. But just if you had to zone in, it's hard to do when it's yourself, right? But if someone was to say to you, Christian, what are the key attributes that you have? And obviously you're still working on them, you're still developing them. But if you had to say, look, there are 1 or 2 things about me that mean that I have made it to where I've made it to. And like I say, obviously you're not at not the end of the game by any means or anything like that. But you said you're curious. You're clearly very hardworking. You're clearly smart. But if you had to distill it, what is it? I mean, what would you say it is about you that has made you successful?
Yeah, it is difficult, as you say, or tricky to really characterize yourself. I think it's a combination of impatience. Impatience with,
but in a good way, right?
Yeah, exactly. With status quo, with things going slowly, or action not being taken, or it's kind of connects to curiosity, but curiosity with a push, and then the ability to work with people, and can connect with people,
right?
And I didn't really realize that that I had leadership skills until I took on a big problem for EQT. I forgot to mention that actually in my little spiel there. During my career, I was working doing deals in private equity part of it. Now we're, multi-asset class. But one of those areas didn't work out. And I was asked by our CEO at the time, our founder, I was asked, can you take that over and see if you can fix it? And I went in there, and I actually came back, and I did the work, of course, together with some colleagues. And we said, what, I don't think we can fix it. I think we have to shut it down. Or clearly and it then became quite emphatic. Like, actually, we've done all the work. It's crystal clear. Here's the analysis. We actually have to shut this down and cut our losses, which is very hard to do, because it also impacts your clients, and it impacts the people that are working with you. So during that time, I had to then, restructure the team, wind down the business, handle all the unhappy clients and all that kind of stuff. And I guess I did that in a way which worked out, I guess, given the circumstances, pretty well. And then I started to understand, and I think maybe the firm actually before me, that I had some leadership skills by being able to connect with different people, work with different people, and also not get stuck in the details. Actually, as a leader, you actually have to delegate and trust. And that's of course something that I'm, still learning, still doing. You never finished, but I guess the tendencies were there, and we have this culture where, hey, if you have a talent, we'll just throw you out there on the deep end of the pool and see if you can swim. And if you swim well, then we'll take you to the deeper pool. And the deeper pool, that's kind of a part of the way that we develop our people. And we of course do a lot of training around it. So I don't want to sound like it's a scary thing, but it's more, if you have capabilities and desires, you will be challenged. And if you meet the challenge, then you continue to move up. And so it was never like I said, it was never my plan to be CEO of a company and our private equity company. But if you think in kind of 3-year, 5-year cycles that you typically do, as a student or as someone in the working force, you see these opportunities opening up as you gain skills.
But presumably you are continually scanning the firm for the next leaders, for the person who's going to replace you. And you must have,
Yes.
you probably haven't told anyone, maybe you have, I don't know, but there's some people that you're thinking they've got what it takes. And is that just a distilled set of factors that you've just talked about? Is it the ability to go in and really make hard decisions? Because shutting down a division, that's hard, right? The easier thing to do is just keep going. Yeah. Is it the ability to look at a problem and work out what needs to be done? Is it to engender trust? Is it to just say, there's the mountain, let's climb it? I mean, what are these, if you can think of someone that right now you're thinking they are a great leader of people, what are these ingredients that that make a great leader? Yeah,
and you mentioned a number of them, and I think it's the ability to actually bring up the next generation of talent and really help that talent to develop and not take credit, not take credit for other people's contributions. Actually, the opposite. Rather really commend people around you, the one who are working in your team, the new joiners, whatever. Commend them on their contributions. So it's leadership in the broader sense. Of course, success as you become more senior, you can really measure success. In private equity is really measurable because what we do is we buy a company for a certain price, we own it for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and you sell it for a certain price, like you do with your house. And you know exactly what you bought it for, you know exactly what you sell it for, and you get the answer. So it's in that sense, it's not a place you can really hide. So the objective performance measures, they come out over time. It takes a long time, but they come out. The subjective ones are the harder ones, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for for the values, as we mentioned. We're looking for how you develop and work with people. We're looking for, are you someone who helps develop the firm? Actually, when you become a partner at EQT, we have about 75 partners now. When you become a partner at EQT, we have this partner contract. It's not a contract, but it's a philosophy. A little bit Kennedy-esque. It's a little bit like, don't ask what, as an employee, you often ask what the company can do for you. Yeah. But when you become a partner, you actually turn it around and say, hey, what can I do for the company? And that's the kind of person we're looking for. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that we've been able to grow, as quickly and as successfully as we have, although we've made lots of mistakes, as you heard one of them here on the way. We learn from those mistakes and move on. And we're looking for people who have that relentless attitude to improve, but do that in a way which is personable, I guess you could say.
So I want thank you for that. I want to just see if we can draw out some advice for the guys and folk who are watching this, because clearly listening to your people, they feel valued, right? You can see that they're all there because they have a sense of worth, a sense of this is my people, a sense of belonging. What do you think a great firm looks like? How does someone know they're being valued? And in a way, it's a bit of a stupid question because you know or you don't know. But our interns are going to be joining. I mean, across the piece, they're going to end up joining like literally hundreds of different firms between them. We've got many hundreds of firms, and you have the whole spread of cultures, from high performance but not particularly transparent, all the things you talked about, all the way through to everything else. And a lot of them are going to arrive and are going to feel like, how do I fit in here? How do I add value? How do I feel valued? So I suppose the question I'm asking is, how do you know when you've arrived at a great firm? What does that look like? You've been there for 6 weeks. Like, how does a great firm look after you?
Yeah, super question. I think it starts from the first time you walk in the door. Are you well received? Are they prepared? Are they thinking about you? Are they, is the IT set up already? Do you have a mentor or someone that can connect with whatever they might call it, or a buddy or something like this? I think so. It starts on day one, and then it continues. Are the colleagues around you, are they really interested in having you as part of the team and giving you responsibility, or do they look upon you as a resource to execute? Yeah. And of course, there's always a spectrum. There's no, also EQT, we're not perfect. We have deadlines. It can get quite tough. There can be quite a lot of stress when you want to win a deal. And when you're, because there's always competition. It's an extremely competitive industry, this one. So of course there's there's this pressure on the one hand side, and then that's why culture actually becomes even more important. You know, how do you handle, you know, how are you handling things under pressure? And then a piece of advice would be, yeah, interact, ask questions. You know, ask questions along the way, ask for feedback. It's, you know, even where we have a, you know, feedback is an important part of a culture like ours, but it's still, there's still always a barrier to giving feedback when you don't know someone particularly well, or if it's difficult feedback. Some people even find giving positive feedback difficult, interestingly enough. So asking for the feedback and maybe giving some feedback in a good way, or, you know, have a walk and talk, or have a coffee, or if it's digital, and of course do it digitally. That feedback is really important, because then you'll start to understand a little bit better, you know, what's happening, you know, behind the scenes or under the surface. And then you can evaluate it, you know, after your 5 or 6 weeks, you can take a step back and say, hey, do I like the people? I think that's the most important. You know, the simple question: do I like the people? Is there anyone there that I would like to learn from and be like in my career? That is, and would I have fun working there, even though if it's hard work? You know, those kinds of questions, pretty simple ones. And I say this to people at every seniority, actually, because if you don't, you can have this perfect job on paper, but if you don't like the people that are around you, then you're not going to have fun, and and if you don't have fun, I don't think you'll be successful.
Yeah. Totally. And look, I completely, your point about feedback is huge. We keep making this point, actually. This must be like the 6th session we've had where we've been talking about feedback. Like, you know, feedback is hard to receive, especially if it kind of says this is how you could do it better, because who wants to be told that they could be better? But actually, it's the way you grow. How do you do it at EQT? If you want to deliver feedback, maybe it's hard feedback, because so far we've presented EQT like Nirvana, right? It's just perfect, and it's it's obvious, of course, it's not, right? And there must be times when you have to deliver feedback, and you have to say, look, this didn't go the way it should have done, and so on. How do you deliver that feedback? What's your style for delivering feedback, and any advice around the whole feedback thing?
Yeah, it's hard, actually. You know, at all levels, whether it's you know, positive or negative. You know, the formalized processes that we have 360-degree reviews where you get, you know, written appraisals, and there's all kinds of information online that you collect with everybody who's been working with you, and then you have a formal meeting. That works pretty well, but still we need to train and work at it and improve. Actually, mostly managers' ability to give that feedback, but also actually the receivers. You know, how do you handle feedback, and how do you ask questions in return, et cetera, and how do you absorb it? Because that's another issue, is that it's hard to absorb feedback if you're resisting some of it. So that process is pretty good. The hard one is the informal one. It's like you have a 3-week project or 4-week project or something, and then you want to do the feedback, and that sometimes slips through the cracks, and therefore. You know, we say the same thing I just said earlier here. Ask for the feedback, whether you're the manager or you know, the person working in the team or whatever. Ask for the feedback, get it out there, draw it out, and have time. You know, it's not a 10-minute thing. Have time to reflect on it and chew on it. And if it's difficult feedback, what we try to do is we try to introduce, you know, the issue, have the person reflect on it, and then have a follow-up. Because typically, you know, if you just think about it, whether it's a friend or a colleague, or whatever, if you get critical feedback, it's like, oh, no, I don't agree with that. It was you know, it was actually what you said or she said, whatever. So you need a couple of days for that barrier to break down a little bit, and then you can have a follow-up conversation.
And do you think it's a mindset? Do you think, Christian, do you think taking feedback is a mindset that some people never really learn to have? So throughout their entire lives, they get feedback and they're just like, yeah, whatever. And absolutely. Some people are good at taking feedback, and how do you cultivate that mindset?
Yeah, great question. I think you're right. I think that some people are very resistant to feedback, and other people are open. It has to do with personality and background and all kinds of different things. And we notice it actually. You know, ultimately, you know, at EQT, just to give the numbers, we have about 1 or 2% who leave EQT on their own volition, which we call regrettable leavers. There were ones that we really would have loved to keep. But we have 10% total turnover every year, because people, you know, they're either in the wrong, you know, maybe in the wrong team, or aren't developing in the way that we and they would like, or whatever, and then they move on to do something else. And we try to handle that in a really good way. But as part of those, you know, let's say 8% or so that we are then ultimately asking to leave, there is a number that, even though they've gotten feedback for a while, still get shocked that when we say the final sentence, and you know, unfortunately, we don't think you can be a part of this team any longer, or however you say it.
Yeah.
And they haven't then absorbed the feedback, and had that person maybe been a bit more open, probably could have adjusted a little bit along the way, because this is, you know, people aren't black or white, right? You can develop, you can learn, and we do again want diversity. So you want diversity in you know, in all different aspects, and that means that some people are going to have a spike in let's say execution or in analysis or in leadership or whatever, and you have to find that whole balance.
Yeah. Listen, I'm going to just dive into a few questions, because as we come up to our time, there's a whole bunch of questions here. So I am going to pull in. So Mabel, I'm going to pull you into the mix. I'm going to bring you on screen because you've got a question about values. So please make sure you're unmuted, and if it's possible, we'd love to also see you. So maybe you can turn your video on. You never know. But so Mabel, let's get you into the mix, and then we'll ask your question around values. And then after that, we are going to pull in Maya Rose. So let's get Mabel, and then we'll get Maya into the mix. I'm hoping we're going to get Mabel. Otherwise, I'm going to read her question out. Okay, here's Mabel. We got her. Here she is.
Hello.
Hi, Mabel. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about you. Where are you? What are you doing at the moment?
I'm from London, but I'm kind of in Sheffield for university. This is quite a big surprise for me. I'm really glad to be with you guys talking, because this is the first time I've actually been on.
Great. Well, you're welcome.
Oh, great. Yeah, nice to meet you.
You see how it works? You put your question in the Q&A, and you can suddenly showtime. All right. So put your question to Christian, and he will answer it.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a general question. I have been trying to figure out what my personal core values are, what I value, right? And I always hear all these things that you want to be. Do you emphasize love? Do you emphasize entrepreneurship, or all these type of things, right? And I just wanted you to know your opinion, like from when you started at EQT and from now, how have your core values changed over time? And like, how important are these core values in difficult times, basically, and how you overcame those difficult times?
Yeah, that's a really good and interesting question. Well, you know, of course, EQT's values, if I take that one just real quick, they've actually also developed. They keep developing over time, and for a while, a few years ago, under my predecessor, who was a fantastic guy, by the way, still with the firm, we tried to get rid of one value which was the informal value, and we tried that because we ended up I would simply put, we ended up partying too much when people got together. Everything was informal, and there were a couple of disrespectful episodes that happened and things like that. So I was like, okay, maybe informal doesn't really work. Maybe it's too sloppy for for our industry. And then we had a revolution at EQT, like, no, we cannot turn into Wall Street people. We can't be this formalized firm with, all the suits and stuff all the time. We need to be able to be ourselves. So we kept that, and that was really, really important. So things do change. When it comes to me personally, probably, I never set out my own values. I didn't have, I don't think I had that perspective actually when I started working. But if I was to sort of retrace my steps, probably I would think more about people then. And I was quite focused on my own, my own world and executing within my little, whatever I was doing. And my advice to you coming into either a new job or into the working world or wherever you are in your careers, try to, be open-minded and try to figure out, what are the senior people around, focusing on? What are they curious about? What decisions in our firm, for example, the most important decisions are outside of people. It's about which investments do you do and which don't you do. And what do we talk about in the investment committee? It was really important. And actually, most important is people. But while me in my younger career here and in this industry was all about the numbers and the business, and not very much about the people at all. But the investment committee, it's probably a third of the time is probably talking about the people and the culture of those companies we're buying. So so if I had, you know, from a values point of view, thought more about that side and paid attention a little bit more, I think I would have, I'm sure I would have, you know, become, yeah, I would have had an easier time in my career progression.
Yeah, Mabel, does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think I definitely agree, because I value community and people in general. I feel like I'm more of a people person.
Mm-hmm.
I love like learning from other people, developing as a person, and seeing how I can improve. And it's nice knowing that I can hold this core value and for when I'm going into the work world, and how, like, you as a senior person, how you hold that and how that is crucial in your decision making, where you want your firm to go and everything. And I think personally for me, that's very very nice to hear, because especially during this time, being in a pandemic, we've lost that social connection.
Yeah.
And we have to, from now, see how we can slowly bring everything back. How else can we connect? Like being here, just from talking through a computer, that's amazing. I'm still connecting with people. What else can we do? How else we can go further? So yeah, thank you for your answer. It's really helpful.
Yeah, those are great questions.
Thanks, Mabel. Yeah, great question, great answer. And look, the fact you're thinking about values now is fantastic, because just like Christian said, when I started out, I thought a little bit about this stuff, but I never thought about it in the context of what am I about? What are my values? What do I care about?
Exactly.
How do I show up? And it's about how you show up, right? And by the way, Christian, you will know this, right? Which is that over your 25 or so years, you build up your own brand and persona. People know you when you're not there, and people say, that Christian guy, what's he like? Right? That's made up of 1,000 little incidents and situations where you behaved a certain way, driven hopefully by your values. And at the end of it, they're like, you know what? We want that guy to be the CEO. I mean, that's the dream, right?
That's the way it happens, actually. You can't plan it. You know, it's
Okay, so I'm going to go to Maya Rose. Hi, Maya, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Welcome. And yeah, you got a question. You took time to write it out, so we're going to take the time to hear it. So let's hear it.
Yeah, okay. So I am currently in my final year studying economics, and I think I've been a little bit taken aback by how set in stone your ideas about your career seem to need to be at this point. So when it comes to applying for internships and grad schemes, you do have to do the part, why are you passionate about X or Y? And I'm kind of, I have interests, I know the things that I enjoy doing now, but I am a firm believer in that you don't truly know what you want to do until you've tried it. So there's definitely, I've struggled to maybe convince people that I'm passionate about doing, whatever I'm applying for. So I do have an interest in private equity. I've identified some, key values and within the role that I think would be interesting. But again, I've got no deal experience. I haven't done private equity before. So, convincing people that I could be a suitable candidate, for me, is difficult. I'm not a very good blagger. I like to be honest, and I like to be in a position of saying, I'm open and I want to try something. So I guess, from your perspective, in my shoes, what would you do? How would you go about preparing for the recruitment process? And, what kind of mindset should I have going into interviews?
Yeah, it sounds like you have a pretty good mindset already, actually. Honest, open, transparent, and well prepared. Private equity in particular is a little bit tricky because our industry doesn't hire very many directly from university. So I think that's changing, actually. It's changing because for many reasons, it's, traditionally we hired mostly from investment banks and consulting firms, and that pool of people, again, is not particularly diverse in thinking. It's kind of either trained in banking or consulting. So we're thinking, how can we find a broader universe of talent? So going, recruiting earlier from university and meeting people like you, for example, would be great. We're trying to actually recruit from startups. We're trying to recruit from corporate development departments and from other areas, so we can get just get a broader perspective. And as we grow and develop, we want to make sure that our teams are actually really diverse and have that background that will bring something else to the table. So a specific advice is hard. I think you're bringing forth your personality, your curiosity, your interests, and just being persistent, because since there are few openings of what you're looking for, you're kind of going to have find a needle in the haystack. And if you don't, then you can think of which industries are actually naturally moving into private equity. And I mentioned a few. So you can think, okay, let's say maybe I can start a startup or join a startup in that is in has some kind of fintech orientation, for example, or any type of startup, because then you're part of building a business and you gain experience in dealing with people and dealing with funding and dealing with building companies, which is actually a lot what we do, just at a bigger scale in private equity, or entering into a large corporate and going to British Telecom or BT and working in their M&A department and buying some software companies and say, hey, look at this, I've actually helped a big company drive change. That's really cool. You should, that's something you can apply in private equity. But thinking of that second, or let's say maybe it's the opposite way, thinking of the what kind of stepping stone can you create, so when you actually come into the sharper recruiting rounds in private equity, which is typically either after a couple of years of experience or even from your MBA, then you'll have something that is unique and I think is going to be more and more appreciated, and it already is, at least in our firm.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, brilliant. And look, I would add this, Myra, is if I look back at my own career, which is now like 35 years, I started life at the bar, and then I became an in-house lawyer, and then I became an investment banker. I went to Singapore and Hong Kong, did something different over there in the derivatives arena. Then I came back, I went to Merrill Lynch, I worked in pensions, I set up my own firm, and now I'm kind of doing entrepreneurial stuff. I mean, look, my career has been the longest, windingest road you're gonna find, and I'm a huge advocate of that. And everything you learn in the previous journey, you then take into the next space. So I think it's about persuading whoever you're in front of that you are just you, right? That you're authentic and that you are passionate about the opportunity. Now, I don't think you have to persuade people that you are going to be obsessed with private equity for the next 40 years. I mean, it's not about that. The world is changing. And everybody knows that. Everybody knows that thing. Yeah. So listen, thanks for your question, Myra Rose. Brilliant. Well done. Thank you very much. Christian, look, our time is gone. And look, you were introduced to me by Wal Colade, and Wal's a great friend. He's one of our co-founders, and I think he might even be watching this. And what's great is to hear how what you've talked about chimes with what he's talked about. He's in the same industry, talking about values, talking about engendering trust, talking about essentially it's about being a good person, being a great person, right? It's more about what you give than what you take, right, at the heart of it, right? Absolutely. One of my favorite books, by the way, if you haven't read it, Givers and Takers. Funny you should say that. Funny you should say that, right? Because we had Damien Dwin on here last week, and that's exactly what he said, the exact same thing. Nice. Give and take, givers and takers. Yeah. So you'd recommend that, right? If there was a book, you'd recommend that would be the one? Very much so. It's a brilliant one. Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much. It's been super having you on. I know you're busy as can be. I know you've had to take time out. I know you've had to step away and say to your PA, look, I've got to do this thing. I know I'm super busy, but I've got to do it. So it means a huge amount that you've done it. Thank you to you. Thank you, Wal, by the way, for the kind introduction. Absolutely brilliant. All best to you and to your amazing firm, EQT, and to all the employees, 1,000 of them. Phenomenal. Thank you so much. And stay safe. I will see you again. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I really enjoyed the questions as well. They were super sharp and made me think a little further in how we keep developing our firm. So have a great evening, everybody. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you. Cheers.